Okay, yeah, I'd like to start by saying what a pleasure it is to be in a room with this many people who so closely share this ideology of, from our point of view, an independent Cape, but most importantly, the belief in a decentralized, confederal type system. And what was quite interesting was having discussions with some people over lunch and finding out that there was a bit of a misunderstanding of who the Cape Party is, what we stand for, how long we've been around, the things we've achieved already, and the other groups that also exist in this space. So I didn't really know what I'd talk about today, and I sort of thought I'd listen to the speeches and get a feel and just have a sort of a conversational approach to things. And so I'd like to put people in the picture who aren't quite familiar with the Cape Party, who we are, what our vision and goals are, just so that we have a clearer idea of where we're coming from. And then on that note too, I agree wholeheartedly with this idea that we need to stand together. And we have a common enemy, and there are different ways of attacking this enemy. And if you look at us at the Cape Party as like your foot soldiers, your frontline fighters who are taking it to them on a political battlefront, we also believe that we can achieve legal victories and civic victories, and we are 100% in agreement with the legal process that the ULA has put forward to push for a referendum. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know about this. They don't know about Section 235 in the Constitution. They don't know about the African Union Charters on self-determination. They don't know about the United Nations Charters on self-determination. And they don't know about our history. Like Munir Buran told us earlier this morning, a beautiful rendition of whether you're brown, whether you're white, whatever your surname is, you know, the Cape is our home. It's been our home for hundreds and hundreds of years. And the ANC intentionally, they want us to think that history began in 1948. They don't want us to know about 300-400 years of history, in fact, even more than that. So I'm going to try, jump in a plane, fly over the history as quickly from a Cape Party perspective, what we think the most important things are, that we need to arm ourselves. When the media tells us we don't belong here, if you speak Afrikaans, go back to Holland. You know, we need to arm ourselves with the artillery to fight back against these lies. So the Khoisan have got a fundamentally different cultural identity to the migration which took place from Central Africa, the Bantu migration, and the Khoisan people were decimated. They were exterminated from the northern tip of Africa all the way down through to the Cape. It was a fact of historical blessing that when, first of all, the Portuguese arrived in 1488, the Dutch in 1652. Then with the movement inland, you had the 100-year wars between the Xhosas who were moving down, and the Xhosas were being pushed down by the Zulus. The largest loss of black life in Southern African history is nothing that the ANC can point fingers at the apartheid government, as bad as that was. It was the Mfecane, which wiped out historical records different between 1 to 2 million black lives were lost at the hands of Shaka Zulu and Mzilikazi. So the conflict between the Xhosas and the Zulus is a far more deeper seated hatred. And in our discussions just now here with the CDP, we need to acknowledge this. It's not black or white. It's much more complex than that. And we need to respect each other as neighbors. And the only way we can do that is by honoring the cultural, religious, language, values of communities. And this is why the Cape Party's vision is for a decentralized confederal canton type system. And why don't we have that system? Well, because we all have a knife in our backs. We got betrayed. And an important fact that people don't know, Simon van der Stel was our first governor here in the Cape. Stellenbosch is named after Simon van der Stel. Simon van der Stel was a colored man. He was a brown Afrikaner. And when the ANC tries to tell us that, no, when the Dutch arrived, it was nothing but slavery and decimation and rape and hatred, absolutely not. The reason we have a majority population in the Cape of mixed race people is because we were living together, intermarrying, a common language, a common religion, a common culture, a common history, 400 years almost of it. And it was this value system and this unity that moving inwards when the British arrived was what kept the Khoisan preserved up until the Fish River, because the Khoisan had been decimated by the Bantu migration moving down. Up at the Fish River was the first point at which the inward moving Boers fought alongside the Khoisan and the British in what would be a 100-year war after that. So the true rainbow nation of South Africa is right here in the Cape, the melting pot, the heartland of the Afrikaans language, this mixture of cultures that have made us after 400 years. From 1872 to 1910, we were an independent governing nation. We had 8 prime ministers. We chose our own policies. We voted for our own government. We are no different to what Britain is doing right now with Brexit. They are the European Union, a union of independent states. In 1910, after the Boer Wars, which was a genocide, concentration camps, the British, who wanted to take control of the diamonds in Kimberley and the gold in the Vaal region, forced us, after a war that they didn't win fair and square, a war of attrition, they took over those levers of power to take control of independent states. We were independent states, the Free State, the Boer Republic of Transvaal, the Natal colony, the Cape colony, you had the Lesotho chiefdom, you had the Swaziland chiefdom. And if you look at South Africa today, you can see our roots coming through. You can see that we're not a natural country. Just look at the name, South Africa. The Union of South Africa. It's a geographical location. The British Empire, it's like they did it one day during tea. What's that place down at the bottom there? What's the continent? Africa? Yeah, South. Let's call it the Union of South Africa. Yeah, you know, that'll be the country's name. Just give us the diamonds and the gold. And from 1910 to 1948, we were controlled by those levers of power, which had British sort of roots to it. In 1948, we were taken over by Transvaal-based a political hegemony in the Transvaal. In 1994, we were taken over by a racist black political entity that shared a similar centralized fascist ideology to the Nats of the past. And the fork in the road where we're at today, it could have been solved many, many years before. And as Hein Marx was talking about in the 1993-1994 times, things could have gone very differently the way that they did. We now have got hundreds of thousands of murders, of dead people, of heartbroken families over the last 25 years that are a result of this political mistake. The responsibility rests on our shoulders to fix that if we want to have future generations to call home the way this place is ours. So, who is the Cape Party? And how did we begin? I was very fortunate to grow up in a family that was very politically minded. And similarly so, in the 1993-1994 era, my father started an organization called the Committee for the Cape Republic. And this group, in conjunction with Dr. Mario Ambrosini, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi of the IFP, PFP, and other liberty-minded organizations, we were at a fork in the road, and you basically had two factions. You can break it down quite simply: good and evil, but there was centralization versus decentralization, fascism versus liberty. And depending on where you stood on the spectrum, the liberty could take different forms. And I grew up understanding that this union of South Africa, this republic that we now found ourselves in, was an arbitrary construct. And when you understand where we came from, it becomes so obvious that the only solution is a solution like United Liberty Alliance is putting forward, like the Cape Party is putting forward, and other groups who also share this vision of independence and self-governance. In 1993, they criticized my father and the Committee for the Cape Republic, saying, "It's never going to work, you're far too early." In 2007, when I founded the Cape Party, they criticized us and said, "It's never going to work, you're far too late." Well, you know what, they were probably both right. And a sad thing about human nature is you almost need to suffer. You really need to hurt before you wake up and realize what I think everyone here in this room realizes. And this country, it almost needs to get as bad as it is right now to have people realize that decentralization, that self-determination, is the only answer. There is no future for us. And it doesn't matter if you're Zulu, or Xhosa, or Boer, or Rooinek, whatever you are, there is no future for you in this country unless you choose self-determination. So, to give an overview of what the Cape Party's future views are, it was a real pleasure to listen to Hein and to Dr. Gerard, and some of the proposals that they put forward, because this is something that the Cape Party also were very much that way leaning. And we think it's quite simple. You don't need to put a hat on your head and say, "Oh, I'm communist," or "I'm this or that." The Cape Party does not believe in policies that are either left-wing or right-wing. We believe in policies that are either right or wrong. And we can take the world as a laboratory of science experiments, countries which succeed and countries which fail. And you invariably will come to the same conclusion as we all have here. And that is, the only way that you can have a country that works is if you give your citizens liberty, the economic freedoms and the political freedoms to pursue their own destiny and their culture. And there are two, the most shining examples we have for a political system, which we at the Cape Party would put forward if we were to get the Cape independent, and that is the Swiss canton system. People think Switzerland is a single country. It is, but it isn't. It's 26 independent countries called cantons. Each canton has got its own veto voting rights. Some of them are German, some of them are French, some of them are Italian, some of them have got higher taxes, some have got lower taxes. You need to give communities freedom. And yeah, if you look at the map of this territory, the entire Western Cape, the entire Northern Cape, parts of the Eastern Cape, there are a great number of municipalities which make up this territory, and each municipality should have the freedom to govern itself and derive its own policies. The next thing is economic policy, and we look to Singapore. Singapore was also a colonial construct. They suffered under British colonial oppression, and in 1965, Lee Kuan Yew took Singapore from a muddied island and turned it to one of the most economically prosperous countries in the world. They had Chinese, they had Indian, they had Malaysian, they had Muslim, they had Christian, they had Hindu, they had all sorts of different groups there fighting each other. And Lee Kuan Yew took this mixed nation and focused on just good economic policies. You don't want to throw a stone at your neighbor if you've got a good job, a roof over your head. You can take care of your family, go on holidays, live a productive life. Now, in this economic environment, as the doctor mentioned, we are heading towards civil war. It doesn't matter if you're Zulu, Xhosa, English, Afrikaans, we're heading towards a very volatile situation. And the two ways that we can make sure that we can live together peacefully in harmony, prosperously, forever, is through economic freedoms like they have in Singapore and political decentralization like they have in Switzerland. With these two models, you can never break a country. And this is why Switzerland has survived through 2 world wars without firing a single bullet at its neighbors. German, French, Italians living side by side harmoniously. When over the border, you had Germans, French, and Italians slaughtering each other at genocide proportions. Good political and economic policies is what makes a great country.
Another 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Great. So, how is the Cape Party going to achieve this? Well, similarly so, we believe that it has to be done through the legal route. And the Cape Party was registered as a political party with the IEC. We have all of our documents. We submitted our manifesto and our constitution, which openly states we will declare the Cape an independent country. We've got the IEC stamp on it. We are legally sanctioned to campaign as we have done for the last 12 years. And so people think we need to get 51% to declare the Cape an independent country. We actually don't. The Cape Party's goal is to drive the DA under 50%. The DA is part of the problem, just like the ANC. If we can get the DA under 50%, let's say they've got 49, 48, and the Cape Party is 3, 4, 5%, we will then sit down with the DA and we'll say, we will not give you a majority unless you give us one thing and one thing only. And that is a referendum on Cape independence. So with as little as a few 100,000 votes, and it could be 150,000 votes, 100,000 votes even, we could hold the balance of power to force the referendum which declares the Cape an independent country. So that is our short, that's almost like a hook way to getting it. There's other ways we could do it, as you mentioned. And I think we do need to realize that there's a few ways to skin this cat. So we would appreciate that the Cape Party, I think, is more than happy to support the ULA in its approaches and sort of legal attacks, and any way we can help out, that would be fantastic. Similarly so, we would really appreciate the support of ULA when it comes to our political battles and helping us just get to that 2, 3, 4, 5% so we can try and hit them from the other angle, and together we all achieve this beautiful vision that we all want. I want to thank you guys so much for putting together an amazing day. Hi Marks, Anne-Marie, your whole team. Thank you so much on behalf of the Cape Party. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.